Good evening, dear participants of our seminar, and I'm so happy to welcome you on the first meeting of our new year. And it's my great pleasure to invite wonderful speaker today, Dr. Yaroslav Shramko, Kryvyi State Pedagogical University, and I have to add that really from the invitation of the Professor Yaroslav Shramko, the group of the Ukrainian philosopher, for participants in the Symposium of Analytical Philosophy in Berlin, we have to start the history of this seminar. Welcome, Yaroslav Shramko, please. It will be very interesting and wonderful and inspired discussion about problem of the truth. Thank you. Let's start.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Holubovich. I'm happy to have an opportunity to present my work at this seminar. I think it's an important initiative to hold this seminar, to cooperate between, promote the cooperation between Ukrainian and Western philosophers. I am happy to present my work at this seminar. Let me start for more. Okay, sorry. I'm going to start my presentation. Okay, yeah, now I think everything is ready. So I first of all, I would like to make some warning, as we already, all of us know, the electricity supply is unstable as well as internet connection. So it can well happen that at some point I will disappear, but then we will have to wait a couple of minutes. Maybe I then will reconnect to another supply, but hopefully everything will go smoothly. So the title of my talk is Fregean Truth Values and Aristotelian Focal Points. I would like to present here a material that was reported at a conference held last September in Wismar, Germany, to commemorate the centenary of Frege's death. I'm going to demonstrate how the Fregean idea of truth values can be effectively employed in a metaphysical explication of the nature of truth within the framework of Aristotle's theory of Prothean being, thereby making a case for the fruitfulness of logical and semantic notions in elucidating one of the central concepts of ontology and epistemology. My talk will be organized as follows. In the introductory section, I will consider the interconnections between truth values and the categorical placement of truth. Section 2 raises the question of the ontological status of truth. Section 3 is devoted to the tension between truth-bearer monism and pluralism, along with the corresponding issues. Section 4 outlines the basics of Aristotle's conception of Prothean as interpreted in Owen's influential account of focal meaning. This prepares the ground for integrating object and property accounts of truth into a unified metaphysical perspective. In section 5, the idea of a focal point is introduced as the natural ontological counterpart of the semantic notion of focal meaning. Section 6 brings together these preparatory considerations to show how objects such as truth values play a central role, both in shaping a general metaphysical account of truth and in articulating a broader understanding of its nature. My talk, I will conclude with a few summarizing remarks. So the notion of truth value was explicitly introduced into logic and philosophy by Gottlob Frege for the first time in his paper Function and Concept, and most notably in his seminal paper on sense and denotation on sense and reference über Sinn und Bedeutung. So as Frege put there, we accept the truth value of a sentence as constituting its denotation. By the truth value of a sentence, I understand the circumstance that it is true or false. There are no further truth values. For brevity, I call the one the true, das wahre, the other the false, das falsche. So let me first briefly recall some principles of linguistic analysis proposed by Frege in his seminal work on sense and denotation. Frege draws a fundamental distinction between sense, Sinn, and denotation, Bedeutung, in order to explain how linguistic expressions can be meaningful, informative, and truth-apt. The denotation of an expression is what it stands for proper names an object, for predicates a function, and for complete declarative sentences a truth value, the true or the false. By contrast, the sense of an expression in the mode is the mode of presentation under which its denotation is given. Different expressions may share the same denotation while differing in sense, as in the well-known example of the morning sun and evening sun. Both denote the same object, Venus, yet present it in different ways. This distinction accounts for the informativeness of identity statements and for differences in cognitive significance between sentences with the same truth values. Sense determines denotation, but it is not reducible to it. Sense belongs to the domain of meaning and understanding, whereas denotation belongs to the domain of objects and truth. So the truth values are fundamental in logical semantics. Their introduction by Gottlob Frege enabled him to systematically implement the core principles of the functional analysis of language by extending the notion of a function to predicate expressions and incorporating a distinct class of functions, propositional functions or truth value functions, whose range consists of truth values. The introduction of truth value functions made it possible to represent the meanings of sentences as functionally determined objects whose truth depends on the combination of truth values of their constituent parts. This established a formal connection between the syntactic structure of propositions and their denotations, namely their truth values. In short, the use of truth value functions transformed semantics from an informal interpretive approach into a precise mathematically grounded framework that laid the foundation for the logical analysis of language in the 20th century from Frege to Montague and beyond. One can note that truth values prove effective in logical and semantic analysis, while remaining philosophically neutral with respect to competing theories of truth. That is, using truth values as a logical tool does not entail commitment to any particular conception of truth, such as the correspondence, coherence, or pragmatist theories, and this may seem an advantage. However, in one important respect, the notion of truth value may still raise a metaphysical concern, specifically with regard to the possible categorical classification of truth itself. Given the truth values are explicated as a certain kind of objects, the question arises as to which ontological category the general phenomenon of truth ought to be assigned. Is the view of truth, when approached through the lens of truth values, compatible with its interpretation as a certain property? And if so, a property of what? If not, how should it be ontologically classified? Let me first stress once again that Frege introduced classical truth values, the true and the false, as objects of a certain kind, serving as denotations, Bedeutungen of sentences. So as Frege put it, every assertoric sentence is to be regarded as a proper name, and its Bedeutung, this is denotation, if it has one, is either the true or the false. The conception of truth value as objects plays a pivotal role in Frege's semantic theory, where sentences, being saturated linguistic expressions, are treated as proper names. Given that names denote objects, treating sentences as names entails that their denotation are likewise to be construed as objects. There is a well-known argument dubbed the slingshot argument by Barwise and Perry, which also originates with Frege and supports the treatment of sentence denotations as truth values. The argument appeals to the substitutivity of co-referential terms. A complex term retains its reference or denotation when any subterm is replaced by an equally referential expression. Its essence can be captured in Frege's own words as follows. What else but the truth value could be found that belongs quite generally to every sentence if the reference of its components is relevant and remains unchanged by substitutions of the kind in questions? If we find this line of reasoning convincing, we appear to have good reason to accept that characterizing a sentence as true or false amounts to relating it to a corresponding object, the truth value. As Frege put it, a statement contains no empty place, and therefore we must take its Bedeutung as an object. But this Bedeutung is a truth value. Thus, the two truth values are objects. Now, the very conception of truth values as objects appear to conflict with the established tradition in philosophical theories of truth, where truth is standardly regarded as a property expressed in language by the corresponding truth predicate, which can be attributed to appropriate kinds of entities. This tradition fully aligns with ordinary linguistic practice, as when we use the adjective true by saying, for example, that Kyiv is the capital of Ukraine is true. Scott Summers explains it as follows. True is an adjective that, in its central use, functions as a grammatical predicate, taking nouns and noun phrases as subjects. This grammatical fact encourages us to think that when we assertively utter such a sentence, we typically refer to something and say of it that it is true. The things referred to is called by philosophers the bearer of truth or bearer of falsity. To say of such a thing that it is true, false, is to predicate truth or falsity of it. In this view, true is a logical as well as grammatical predicate used to describe or characterize entities as having a certain property, namely truth. So we see here a conflict between conception of truth as an object in the Fregean conception of truth values and standard conception of truth, characterizing of truth as a property or predicate, expressed by a predicate. It should be noted that Frege held truth to be pointless as a predicate, and thus, in effect, excluded the property of being true as redundant, since, in his view, characterizing a sentence as true adds nothing to its content. So, as he explains, it is also worth noticing that the sentence, I smell the scent of violets, has just the same content as the sentence, it is true that I smell the scent of violets. So it seems that nothing is added to the thought by my ascribing to it the property of truth. Of course, if we share this view, the problem of the coexistence of truth values and the property of truth is resolved quite simply by rejecting the latter in the favor of former. However, such a solution would be rather straightforward and not particularly interesting, and given the well-developed criticism of deflationism, in particular of redundancy theories, it would presuppose a controversy with the arguments against them. It appears that more philosophically rewarding to adopt a richer ontology that accommodates both truth values and the property of truth, and to explain how the traditional interpretation of truth as certain property can be reconciled with Frege's conception of truth values as objects. It emerges that Aristotle's theory of Fregean can be effectively applied to bring these approaches together so that they can jointly contribute to a unified metaphysical account of the nature of truth. So if we interpret truth as a certain property or attribute, the question of the bearers of this property naturally arises. In language, this property is usually expressed by the predicate true. By ascribing this predicate to certain things and thereby stating that these things are true, we thus We thus treat them as the bearers of the property of being true. Now, as noted, for instance, by Barhil, truth can be predicated of many kinds of things: propositions, sentences, statements, judgments, assertions, declarations, claims, utterances, beliefs, conjectures, hypotheses, theories, stories, and so on. Thus, there seems to be a large number of different bearers of the property of truth. For example, Friederike Moltmann refers to things of this kind as attitudinal objects and observes that such objects can be rather ontologically diverse. Some attitudinal objects are mental states, such as beliefs, intentions, desires. Others are the non-enduring products of actions in the sense of Twardowski. For example, judgments, decisions, claims, promises, requests, and others. So it can be added that some other possible bearers of truth may be purely abstract in nature, such as propositions, while other truths turn out to be linguistic units such as sentences. In light of this variety of possible bearers of truth property, the question regarding the very nature of this property comes to the fore. It is clear that the properties of such abstract entities as propositions must differ significantly from those of linguistic expressions like sentences, or mental phenomena such as beliefs, and of empirical objects such as utterances. And for example, Stroller observes that given that the entities bearing certain peculiar properties are different source of entities, it is just natural that those properties are different as well. Does this we have a question that does this imply that there are many different properties of being true? If we have a variety of truth bearers and they're ontologically diverse, then we can conclude that we have a lot of a variety of properties of being true. And the literature reveals two opposing approaches to answering this question. One approach developed within the truth monism answers this question in the negative, but claiming that there can be only one property of being true. So, for example, Newman expressed this in the following way: as the property true is the same property in all cases. The word true is univocal because the word true means the same thing in all contexts, in the sense that it refers to the same property in all contexts. Taken in a strong sense, with respect to possible truth bearers, this approach leads to the view that only one kind of entity can serve as a proper truth bearer, be it propositions, sentences, beliefs, or something else. This position, however, evidently runs counter the everyday linguistic practice, since we can speak of our beliefs as being true, just as we can say that the same of our statements or our judgments. Therefore, a weaker view is often adopted, according to which some entities are accepted as primary truth bearers, while others are regarded as secondary truth bearers, deriving their truth-bearing status from the primary ones. Most often, the primary truth bearers are taken to be propositions, while other candidates can bear truth only by virtue of some relation to propositions. However, this leaves open two related questions. First, do secondary bearers of truth genuinely possess this property, or rather are statements about their truth merely the result of linguistic convention? And the second question is, if they do possess such a property, is it the same as that attributed to primary bearers? Consider the first of these questions. If its first part receives a negative answer and its second part consequently an affirmative one, then we remain within the confines of strict truth monism. If we respond to this question in the opposite way, we may begin to move toward one or another version of truth pluralism. It is widely acknowledged that many contemporary philosophers, like most philosophers over the course of Western philosophical history, are monists about truth. However, a pluralistic approach to truth has also gained considerable traction within the contemporary analytic tradition. Several formulations of truth pluralism have been proposed, including one that posits the existence of different properties of truth instantiated by the same kind of truth bearers. For instance, sentences, strong pluralism according to which there is no universal or common way of being true. It then becomes clear that if we acknowledge the existence of truth bearers that are fundamentally different in nature, yet equally primary, the pluralistic thesis gain further justification. Following this path, one can arrive at a strict version of truth-bearer pluralism, according to which there are many truth-bearers, all of which are primary and each of which independently instantiates a distinct property of truth. One of the most recent articulation of this conception is presented by Strolla, who defends a version of pluralism about the property of truth that stems from the admission of different kinds of primary truth bearers. He argues in particular that focusing on truth bearers sheds new lights on the nature of truth, and that if a plurality of kinds of truth bearers is accepted, a plurality of truth properties is difficult to avoid. Moreover, it may be emphasized that different domains of discourse can involve distinct kinds of truth bearers and consequently distinct properties of truth. In order to accommodate all possible versions of truth pluralism, included in strongest form, the main pluralistic thesis is sometimes formulated in overly general terms, merely identifying it with the view that different claims are apt to be true in different ways. On the one hand, such a formulation threatens to trivialize the very idea of truth pluralism by making it too broadly applicable and by diminishing its specific concern with truth. On the other hand, it strictly parallels Aristotle's famous characterization of being as something that is spoken of in many ways, Palacios legatai. One might attempt to draw on Aristotle's general approach to characterizing being, particularly being something, in order to avoid mechanical pluralism in the interpretation of truth, as well as the undesirable fragmentation of the property of truth into separate elements. In this way, one may hope to arrive at a coherent physical account of the nature of truth, in which both truth values and the property of being true, as manifested in various bearers, fulfill their respective roles. Here, Aristotle's account of being through pros hen, as interpreted in Owen's notable analysis, may prove particularly fruitful. So let us take a look. So Aristotle, at the beginning of the fourth book of Metaphysics, substantiates the possibility of a general science whose subject matter should be being as such, being qua being. The possibility of such a science is grounded in the idea that although the term being has many senses, being can be sent in many ways, all of them are, as Aristotle put it, related to one. This is Greek translation of Greek term pros hen. So pros hen is it means related to one point, or they are directed toward one central point. Here is the corresponding famous excerpt from Metaphysics in the classical translation by W.D. Ross. So there are many senses in which a thing may be said to be, but they are related to one central point. So here is the pros hen, related to one central point, one definite kind of things, and are not homonymous. Everything which is healthy is related to health. One thing in the sense that it preserves health, another in the sense that it produces it, another in the sense that it is a symptom of health, another because it is capable of it. And that which is medical is related to the medical art, one thing in the sense that it possesses it, medical art, another in the sense that it is naturally adapted to it, another in the sense that it is a function of the medical art. And we shall find other words used similarly to this. So too, there are many senses in which a thing is said to be, but all refer to one starting point. Some things are said to be because they are substances, other because they are affections of substance, other because they are process towards substance, or destruction, or privations, or qualities of substance, or productive or generative of substance, or of things which are relative to substance, or negation of some of these things, or of substance itself. So this is this fragment of Aristotle, where he explains his theory of proshead being. The being is said in many ways, but is related to one central point. Aristotle here raises the question of how we can arrive at a unified notion of being, given that things can be in different ways. The answer to this question involves not only pure being, but also being something. For example, being healthy, or being medical. In this case, attention is directed to properties of things, such as the property of being healthy and the like. It can be pointed out that even though a predicate expressing a certain property may exhibit different shades of meaning, especially when applied to different things, such as healthy person, healthy food, or healthy climate, a general sense is preserved in all these cases, corresponding to that property of being healthy. The preservation of such unity of sense is ensured precisely by Aristotle's idea of proshen, that is relation to one central point. This unity then extends to being as such. So now let us consider the interpretation of this Aristotelis idea by G.E.L. Owen. So William Ellis Lane Owen, it's a British classical scholar and philosopher, best known as an outstanding authority on ancient Greek philosophy, one of the leading philosophers of his time. Owen published numerous works devoted to Aristotle, metaphysics, and ontology, and he has several such works, which I present shortly, display here. So Owen proposed an influential interpretation of proshen as focal meaning. So this is Owen translation, or better to say interpretation of this proshen term, or proshen notion, or proshen relation as focal meaning. And this focal meaning, according to which the different senses usually incorporated and predicates, such as healthy or medical or some other predicates, each baked by a corresponding property, are all said to have one focus, one common element. Which, with respect to being, this means that all its senses can be explained in terms of substance and of the sense of being that is appropriate to substance. Owen characterized this concept as a word. Of a word as having many senses pointing in many ways to a central sense, one central sense, as a major philosophical achievement, making possible Aristotle's conception of first philosophy. So being has many ways, many shades, but all these shades are directed to one central point, have one focal meaning, and first philosophy, the metaphysics, is the science which explores or investigates this focal meaning of being. This characterization can be schematically represented as follows, taking into account Owen's interpretation of proshen in terms of focal meaning. It generally concerns predicates that exhibit a plurality of applications reflecting different ways in which some generic underlying property can be realized. Let us consider such a predicate, say F, which expresses the corresponding property of being F. This property may have various bearers, bearer 1, bearer 2, bearer 3. For example, F is healthy. And then it have various beer, healthy man, healthy food, healthy climate, and can therefore be exemplified in many ways. For each such way of being F, there correspond a distinct shade of sense of the predicate F, depending on the kind of bearer involved. Let us label the various ways of having the property, ways of being F as ways of being 1, ways of being 2, ways of being 3, and so on. And the corresponding shades of sense of the original predicate as shade of sense 1, shade of sense 2, shade of sense 3, and so on. All these ways of being F, together with all these shades of sense of the predicate F, are oriented by means of the special Prof-Hen relation toward a focal meaning represented by a certain abstract singular term in this kind's Fness. So we have such a figure or such a diagram. So here is F, predicate F, which represent property F, general property F, for example, healthy. And then we have several bearers of this predicate, and corresponding every bearer then express several particular shade of sense of the predicate F. So healthy person, healthy food, healthy climate, and then we have a different shade of senses, shades of sense of being healthy. So being healthy as healthy person and healthy food and healthy climate, there are various shades of senses of this property being healthy, and they all are directed to their focal meaning, and this focal meaning is health. So healthy person exhibit healthy food is good for being for health and so on. So healthy climate promotes health, and so every such particular shade of sense represent one focal meaning which is embodied or focused in this focal meaning of this property. So this characterization, sorry. Mm-hmm. So this representation clearly implies that the focal meaning is not to be found among the shade of sense of the predicate expressing the property under consideration, but rather belongs to it, to an abstract notion external to it. The key point here is expressed in the following statement by Owen. The claim of the book 4 that being is an expression which with focal meaning is a claim that statements about non-substances can be reduced to translated into statements about substances. And it seems to be a corollary of this theory that non-substances can have matter or form of their own, since they are no more than logical shadows of substances. This reading of Fregean by Owen has dominated the view taken on the Aristotelian device in recent scholarship. I will also take it as a paradigmatic view on the nature of properties, one that aligns closely with the Fregean interpretation of properties as functions of substances. In what follows, I aim to show that the conceptual resonance between Aristotle and Frege at this point may help to clarify the relationship between truth values and the property of truth. Aristotle may sometimes be seen as vacillating between the linguistic and ontological levels, as in his use of healthy in the excerpt cited above, where the adjective substantivized by an article may denote either that which is healthy or the expression healthy. This ambiguity is illustrated in the Fregean reconstruction diagram in Figure 1, where in a mixed manner, both the ways of being themselves and the corresponding shades of sense are directed toward the focal meaning. So if we have here, we have on the one side, we have way of being of the property f, and on the other side, we have shade of sense of the corresponding predicate. So we have to differentiate between the metaphysical property, the property as a part of reality, and its expression in the language. But so when Aristotle says or explicates these ways of being, it is not quite always quite clear whether he speaks of the properties themselves or he speaks of its expression in the language. So Owen resolves in his interpretation of focal meaning this possible ambiguity by consistently linking focal meaning to the term being, not to the entity, not to the substance itself, but to the term being, rather to the being itself. To this end, he places this term in quotation marks wherever relevant, thereby indicating its autonomous use and transferring the consideration to the semantic level through the explicit use of the notation of meaning. As meaning pertains to linguistic expressions rather than to phenomena of reality, speaking of meaning always involves reference to the terms that convey it. Hence, under this interpretation, focal meaning is clearly a semantic notion corresponding to certain linguistic terms that express it. Incidentally, in the expression focal meaning, the word meaning is used not as a technical term, but in the general semantic conceptual sense, that is, as the semantic content of a word within the natural language or philosophical discourse. Here, meaning designates the conceptual content of a term in its various uses, whereas focal indicates the primary or basic sense that unites the others through a certain metaphysical connection, the Prof-Hen relation. In this respect, meaning coincides with what is often called conceptual meaning, the basic logical or cognitive content of a word or expression that determines its role in thought and communication, or lexical meaning, understood as the semantic information attached to a lexical unit regardless of its specific context. But can we undertake a more precise semantic analysis of the concept of focal meaning by drawing, for example, on Frege's conception, according to which the general meaning of a linguistic expression should be divided into sense, Sinn, and denotation, Bedeutung. So it seems natural to suggest that when viewed through the lens of Frege's distinction between sense and denotation, the focal meaning of an expression, if any, should itself be articulated into focal sense on the one side and a focal denotation on the other. However, it should also be observed that since focal meaning is introduced through the many senses of an associated expression, this notion, as Owen appears to conceive it, turns out to be very close to the sense of that expression and may in fact even be identified with it. The question of denotation then remains largely open. Yet it is denotation that accounts for the ontological dimension of language and determines the relation between language and extra-linguistic reality. It represents either directly or through the mediation of sense the extra-linguistic entity to which a linguistic expression refers. Therefore, once the metaphysical import of focal meaning is acknowledged, it is reasonable to supplement its sense component with an additional element corresponding to the Fregean denotation, thereby securing its ontological relevance. Thus, on the one hand, the Fregean conceptualization of focal meaning requires its articulation into focal sense and focal denotation. On the other hand, considering its actual use in Owen's interpretation, it is largely explicated as expressing the sense of some singular abstract term towards which the various possible senses of the predicate in question are directed, and through which they all receive a unified explanation. Being explicated in this way, the focal meaning of the term should determine a certain denotation, which can then serve as a natural complement to the genuine sense component embodied within it. To emphasize the objectual character of the denotational component of the focal meaning of the term in question, I shall refer to it as its focal point. The latter is precisely the extra-linguistic abstract object that serves as the focus of attraction for the relevant group of properties, more precisely for a property in all its possible manifestations or ways of being, such as predicate healthy, which represents all the possible ways of being healthy. The focal point determined by some focal meaning thus serves as an Aristotelian substance to which a property expressed by the predicate directed toward this focal meaning is related. In this way, the Aristotelian prose-hand relation, as interpreted by Owen, brings about the reduction of statements about non-substances to statements about substances, an outcome Owen regards as among its most significant. So the extended reconstruction of the prose-hand relation developed with due regard to Frege's conceptual framework is then presented in this figure. Here, dotted lines indicate the bifurcation of the previously undivided focal meaning into two distinct components, the focal sense and focal point. So we have focal meaning, and it is divided into focal sense and focal point, which represents actually focal denotation. Thus, the prose-hand relation no longer connects directly and the focal meaning with both the semantic and ontological dimensions of a predicate, but does so through certain intermediate stages. Namely, before reaching its focal meaning, the various shades of sense of a given predicate are directed by the prose-hand relation toward a specific focal sense, while the corresponding property in its various instantiations is linked by the same prose-hand relation to the distinct focal point. These two components are of different nature. Regarded as an abstract object, the focal point is obtained by way of abstraction from the collection of extensions of the concept that serves as the various denotations of the given predicate. The focal sense, represented by some abstract notion, comprises information obtained through the conceptual elaboration of the shades of sense of the given predicate that is common to them all. Subsequently, the focal sense and the focal point are brought together into unified focal meaning, thereby securing the metaphysical integrity of the underlying property. Thus, the prose-hand relation indicated in this schema by arrows also reflects the The prose-hand relation indicated in this schema by arrows also reflects the increasing level of abstraction of the components involved. As already noted, it is metaphysical relation, and if it also incorporates sort of semantic interconnection, it does not so only implicitly. So now consider this general conception as applied to the notion of truth. So, as Owen observed, Aristotle has not solved the problem of defining focal meaning. So, he only explains focal meaning by examples. Instead of giving a precise definition, Aristotle illustrates the main idea of his Fregean with various examples, selecting different properties to demonstrate how their distinct senses can be elucidated through a focal meaning of some abstract concept. Notably, the examples he employs are not very broad in scope and somewhat repetitive. So we find among them properties such as friendship, good, healthy, medical, and some other. And interestingly, these examples of what can be said in many ways never involve the concept of truth. This may seem surprising since throughout his works, Aristotle developed substantial attention, devoted substantial attention to the notion of truth, engaging both with its general theory and with the elucidation of its nature. Yet he never considered this notion in the context of the Fregean relation. So when speaking about Fregean relation, he never involves explicitly as example with truth. He speaks about healthy, about friendship, about medical, but never about truth, and it is quite interesting. One possible explanation here might be that truth is accorded a special place among other philosophical notions in Aristotle's works, even regarded in certain contexts as synonymous with being. The term being and non-being, as Aristotle put it in other places of metaphysics, are employed firstly with reference to the categories and secondly with reference to the potentiality or actuality of these or their opposites, while being and non-being in the strictest sense are truth and falsity. So in this fragment, Aristotle identifies being and non-being with truth and falsity. So here it is interesting to compare with Lukasiewicz remarks that ontologically truth has its analog in being and falsehood has its analog in non-being. So Aristotle introduced Fregean idea to address being. Truth is not just an example of being. The relation is more intimate. What is said of being can, with adjustments, be said of truth and vice versa. Once we can say of something that it exists, we can likewise say that it is true that it exists, and conversely. A natural task would be to reconstruct the notion of truth within the context of the Fregean relation and to examine its focal meaning. As it turns out, Fregean truth values can play a key role in this framework precisely as such focal points, ensuring the equilibrium of the entire construction. Indeed, whereas for some other abstract notions, such as health, it may not be easy to specify what the corresponding abstract object should be like in order to serve as a focal point, the truth values are already well established in such a role. So let us begin with the property of being true. In language, this property is expressed by the predicate true. Assume that there may be different bearers of this property, for example, sentences, propositions, belief, utterances, and so on, and accordingly there may be many ways of being true. Is such way correspond to a certain sense of the predicate true, all of which are directed toward a focal sense common to them, as grounded in the accepted theory of truth. For example, if we adopt the correspondence theory of truth, then to say that a sentence a proposition, a belief, or an utterance is true means that it in some way corresponds to a certain fact. Therefore, regardless to the types of bearers that impart particular shades of sense to the truth predicate, one case is when the bearer is a sentence that is said to be true, another when it is a belief. All these shades are directed toward a single focal sense, which is specified by some theory of truth, in this case, by the principles of the correspondence theory. This focal sense determines the corresponding truth value, the true, an abstract object serving as the focal point for the various ways of being true. When unified with a single structure, the focal sense, shaped in this case by the correspondence theory, and the focal point, namely the truth value, the true, together constitute the focal meaning of the singular abstract term or abstract known truth, which in English represent the corresponding concept of truth. The Aristotelian Fregean schema of the Prof relation for the notion of truth is can then be presented by the following schema or figure. Here I take propositions, sentences, and beliefs as typical truth bearers, though of course there may be other types of such bearers as well. So let T stand for the property of being true, and T in quotation marks express the corresponding truth predicate. Let way of being true, way of being P means the way of being true proposition, way of being S, the way of being true sentence, and so on, and analogously for the various shades of sense of the predicate true. A general schema presents various shades of sense of the predicate true and the corresponding ways of being true depending on the particular bearer of this property. All these particular shades of sense are directed by means of this cross-general relation towards their focal sense. So, as we see, here we have predicate true, which express property to be true property, and we have several bearers of this property, and here they have the corresponding shade of sense shades of sense of being true. Then we have true proposition, to be true proposition, to be true sentence, to be true belief, and all these shades correspond to one focal sense, which here is shaped by the correspondence theory. But of course, one may adopt a different theory of truth. In this case, instead of correspondence, one would use coherence or usefulness or another characterization depending on the chosen theory of truth. And the way of being true is directed by the Prof-Gen relation by the same focal point, which is here the truth value, the true. So proposition bears truth value true, a sentence denotes truth value true, belief express truth value true, and so on. So about they all are directed to the same focal point. In this, the role of this focal point is represented by the corresponding truth value. And then together, focal sense, which is shaped by the correspondence theory of truth, together with truth value true, constitute the focal meaning of the notion of truth as abstract notion. So thus, the question posed in the title of section 2, whether truth is an object or a property, should be answered by saying that it is both. Notably, truth values have a logical priority over the property of being true, since the focal meaning and thus the focal point is logically prior to the entities directed toward it. In its turn, the property of truth is revealed as a certain relation between the corresponding truth bearer and the truth value. For example, saying that a sentence is true means that this sentence denotes the corresponding truth value, and saying that an utterance is true means that the corresponding utterance expresses the corresponding truth value. With this understanding, Frege's truth values take on their full role in a general philosophical explication of truth as focal points that provide the focal meaning for the possible implementation of the properties associated with the concept of truth, holding all these implementations together. That is in focus. Following Aristotle, we can thus state that there are many ways or there are many senses in which something may be said to be true. Yet everything that is true is related to truth. That is to the corresponding truth value. One thing, a sentence in the sense that it denotes truth, that it denotes the truth value, the true. Another, a preposition in the sense that it bears truth, so that is, it bears the corresponding truth value. The true. Another, a belief in the sense that it holds to truth. Another, an utterance in the sense that it expresses truth, and so forth. And so forth. Here, truth is an abstract object, with a specific focal meaning, through which all possible instances of the truth predicate acquire their specific senses, and which at the ontological level is represented by a special focal point, the corresponding truth value, the true. In this way, the variety of different particular meanings associated with the property of being true can be reduced to a single focal meaning underpinned by a focal point, namely a certain truth value. Truth values are thus those starting points, that is, substances in the Aristotelian sense, to which all true and false things refer. So, and by way of conclusion, let me summarize that I was trying to show how, with the help of Owen's interpretation of Aristotle's Fregean in terms of focal meaning, supplemented by Frege's machinery of truth values, truth-bearers pluralism can be naturally combined with the monism of truth as an abstract notion. In the proposed framework, both the truth value, the true, as focal point to which the particular instances of truth instantiated by different bearers are directed, and the concept of truth, which provides the focal meaning for the corresponding abstract term, find their integral places. Clearly, the same type of analysis can also be extended to other notions related to truth and associated with different truth values, most notably to the notion of falsity. If we stay within the Bible and classical paradigm, then given that falsity here is simply non-truth, everything that has been said about the property of being true and the truth value, the true, along with their joint contribution to the general focal meaning of truth, can be directly mirrored into the property of being false and the truth value, the false. Moreover, the proposed framework allows, for example, to analysis of the concept of possibility, uncertainty, and paradoxality, drawing on the methodology of many valued logics, such as the three-valued system of Lukasiewicz, Kryvyi, or Priest, as well as the examination of various shades of truth and falsity by means of the truth degrees of fuzzy logic. By way of a general conclusion, it can be hoped that the discussion developed in this material not only provides a clearer understanding of the notion of truth and its place within the categorical framework, but also shows that the application of logical notions and methods can have genuine philosophical value. The careful use of logical concepts of techniques is thus not a merely formal exercise, but a fruitful way of addressing long-standing metaphysical problems in a more transparent and disciplined manner, the problem of truth being among them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry for my voice.
I understand. It's a very, very interesting presentation, brilliant, amazing, and I suppose we have to start our discussion or clarification of some point. Please, you are welcome. Daria, please. Yes, a question. I follow for the...
No. Emoji.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Some questions.
Anna Laktonova, raise, but not virtual hand.
And maybe because I don't have possibilities to follow for the. Please, Dmitry Lishenko.
Hello, thank you very much for the fantastic presentation. I have a lot of questions and comments, but I understand that we are limited in time, and I would like to ask, is it true that what you are trying to present has a priority within metaphysics of truth? And if you speak rather about metaphysics of truth, apart from the question of bearers of truth, the very important or crucial point of metaphysics of truth is truth makers. Could it be the case that then focal meaning as a sum of focal point and focal sense, how I understood from your presentation, would play a role of truth maker? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think this is an interesting point, interesting focal point you make. I mean that really the idea of truth makers plays important role in the metaphysical theories of truth. And here I think one can find the application of this machinery of focal meaning and focal points and focal sense as reconstructing them in the direction of truth making. So what is normally in metaphysical theory of truth, as such a truth makers are considered to be facts, for example. So some fact makes truth the corresponding sentence. And exactly the Fregean theory of truth values, it is sometimes used or sometimes considered as being as destroying this fact ontology, so to say, as truth value, the true represent the so-called great fact or big fact. So not particular facts make something true, some sentence true, but the big fact, the truth value, the true itself, then makes true all the true sentences, so to say, or the world as such. So I think in this context, really, the idea of truth making can find its application.
But from the other point of view, it is maybe senseless to speak about truth makers because you see how you unify Frege and Aristotle. Truth could be in different focal points, probably in different contexts, relation, property itself, or concept, or even predicate. You are in a way intercrossing logical, linguistic, pragmatic, other methodologies in your treating, in your metaphysical treating of truth. So, yes, thank you.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yes, Dmitry, if it was only comment, but please, Dmitry Lishenko.
Yes, I want to ask a question. Actually, I wanted to ask a question about the truth making, but I was the Anna asked it first. But actually, there is a possibility to ask another question related to truth making. Are you going to proceed in the development of the so-called by the analogy as a truth-making semantics, for example, developed by Kit Fine or Mark Yago or others, with your truth bearers and the, I don't know, are you going to develop a technical theory of your focal truth meaning or with this which you have described right now metaphysically, let's say? I mean, are you going to develop it technically in a formal way? This is first question. I have another one.
Yeah, so as I said, this aspect of metaphysics of truth, that the idea of truth making, it's very interesting by itself. But I didn't yet consider it
Related, yes.
Yeah, this aspect. But actually, I think this can be an interesting line of thinking or developing this general construction further.
Yes, because I think that truth makers, these are not just facts as you stated, these are states of affairs in general and entities. For example, a world can be considered as an entity which makes your statements true, for example, there are different possibilities, of course. And for example, if you say that the truth bearer, the focal truth bearer, the focal truth bearer, which makes all sentences true, yes, but as the world, for example.
Okay.
If it doesn't exist, let's assume that it doesn't exist. For example, as Marcus Gabriel says, the world doesn't exist. He develops this concept in his general books, and for example, with his books, with his conversation with Graham Priest, for example, he states everything exists except for the world. And if in such a case, this what will it do to your theory of truth of a focal truth bearer, the truth from capital T, whatever? What will it do? Can you imagine such a situation?
Yeah, so exactly. Usually, if one would like to deny or to reject this truth making or many truth bearers variety of many truth bearers, then one then involves such a argument as, for example, by Davidson. So there's one big fact, and this big fact, this is exactly the world, and then the world then makes true all the true sentences, and then you say, okay, but what?
If it doesn't exist, yes.
If the world doesn't exist, okay, it is possible that the world does not exist, but then what still exists is the truth value, the true, and the true is not the world, is the abstract idea. Is the abstract idea in Platonic realm of ideas, yes, and it is eternal, and it exists independently of the world.
Immutable, eternal, exists outside. Okay.
Then it's exactly why we need or why the truth values, in particular the truth values, the true, is useful because. Yeah.
Thank you. Nadia Kozachenko, and next Svetlana Balinchenko. Please, your question.
Good evening, dear colleagues. I apologize, I have no electricity, so it is dark around me. Thank you, Yaroslav, for such an interesting and detailed report. I have one teeny question. In the Aristotelian sense, there is indeed an ontological basis here. But can we say, in principle, that any other truth values will be just shades of truth or falsehood, as those that are ontological tied to being or non-being? Thank you.
So sorry. Which the truth values you mean? So all the others except of truth and falsity.
Yes, but any others truth values, such as in fuzzy logic, in many-valued logic, can be treated like shades of truth or falsity.
Yeah, so
maybe we have another way, non-ontological way, to interpret these truth values.
Yeah, but I think in this theory, any truth value should have an ontological counterpart, so to say. So any truth value is ontologically grounded, I would say. For example, as truth is grounded in being, and non-truth, falsehood is grounded in non-being, for example. Then if we involve many valued logic, for example, and other truth values, such as if we have three valued logic, for example, by Lukashevich, then the third truth value would correspond to possibility. So the idea of possibility, then it is also some ontological counterpart or some reality. So if we take, for example, the logic of paradox, then the third truth value would correspond to paradoxality. So it means that any truth value should have one ontological content or some ontological sense, so to say. If it does, that it means that it is merely a technical game. And then in this way, or in this case, we can exactly to see when this or that many non-classical logic or many valued logic is ontologically grounded, or is it just a technical device, so to say.
Thank you. It is very interesting.
Thank you. Svetlana Valenchenko, please.
First of all, thank you, Yaroslav, for the inspiring presentation. It's not my topic, but I have a question. I wonder if it's possible to imagine some intersubjective shift or maybe inversion of the focal point of truth. I mean, if we refer to the example of I smell violets and the redundant predicate of it's true that I smell violets, if we apply maybe Whiteheadian terms, I smell violets, it means that I have some direct recognition. It means that I have some causal efficacy. In the past, I had some experience of smelling violets, and I can recognize the smell. And it may imply also representational immediacy. So I can refer to the smell as the smell of violet. But if we shift anything in the example, it becomes quite problematic. For instance, if I see, if I substitute and say I smell the moon without causal efficacy, or if I substitute and say, for instance, someone says you smell violets about my senses. So such shifts are they relevant for the focal point for the focal point of truth? Can we imagine intersubjective inversion of the focal point here? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think this is the Fregean idea that the notion of truth, the predicate truth, so the property of truth, the property of being true is actually redundant. We just can eliminate it by such kind of examples as you pointed. But it is really controversial. It is indeed controversial. Whether it is possible in all the contexts. So it can be easily eliminated in such a bivalent, very restrictive classical context. But if we involve exactly as you say it, so for example, if we substitute this smell of violets, substitute not I smell, you smell. Generally, the smell of violets is such and such and such. So whether we can have avoid the idea of truth, it is questionable. Yeah, it is questionable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Really? Yeah. Anna, please. You talk that there are no time, but really we have enough time for conversation. Thank you. Anna.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, there are a lot of questions, comments, etc. But they're very curious. Why do you systematically avoid speaking of reference in the context of Frege? Why do you use denotation, denoting?
Yeah, so it's it is really, from my point of view, it's really a linguistic method of linguistic conversion or translation. The Fregean term Bedeutung. So I would prefer to speak about denotation, because reference in my so to say, in my picture, would be the relation. The reference is the relation between relation on referring. Yes, when we say we refer to something, so we have a reference. So a reference from linguistic expression to the object. And this object is denotation, so to say. But actually, in the literature, these terms are very often used synonymously. So denotation, designation, reference.
But you can also, excuse me, commit yourself quite strongly, but by using denotation and denoting, because Bedeutung is also very much connected in Fregean sense with meaning. And is like the very important result of your findings is about meaning.
Yeah, so exactly, meaning in English term meaning is very, very, so to say, not it has really many senses, so to say.
Okay.
It's not so. And then we can say meaning in strong sense, in meaning in broad sense, so linguistic meaning, or meaning as a Fregean Bedeutung. Then one can say that it is the objectual meaning, so or object meaning. So the terminology here is really sometimes very, very diverse. Therefore, as you noticed, it is fully correct that I intentionally decided to not to use. Not to broaden my terminology, and to just to actually I could consequently use reference instead of denotation, but it is just for convenience. So linguistic so to say convention. So I decided to use this denotation, and then subsequently to stick to this terminology.
Thank you. Alexander Maevsky, I don't see you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see. I wanted to ask a question, then I didn't want, then I wanted again. So I just wanted to to ask, do you feel there is something very Platonic in all this theory that is referencing to some general meaning, talking about shades, it's like aspects, talking about is associations, being like projections, and that is, I mean, does it seem that this is just a sort of a quirky vocabulary to talk about Aristotle in Platonic terms? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you have a point. You are right. So that it is connected with the point that actually Fregean view is very Platonic. I think that Fregean general semantic conception is very Platonic. And therefore, so this conception, if we involve Fregean view or Fregean consideration, then it should be Platonic, so to say, in some deep sense of the word. Yeah, I don't think that if a theory is so has such a Platonic flavor that it is a bad thing. Actually, so we either we assume that such abstract objects like numbers or truth values or geometrical figures either they exist or they does not exist actually as entities.
Yeah.
Do not exist.
Are they real?
Fregean,
Are they real or not?
yeah.
Are the truth objects
Yeah.
real
So
or not?
this is evidently a realistic theory.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalia Vyatkina, please.
Thank you. I would like rather to support Yaroslav in this question, which was put by Anya Kivanova, and make some reference to a very well-known book of Wolfgang Kühne from Hamburg, who was I don't know whether he's a head of the Bolzano society now.
About abstract objects, yeah, he has a book.
This book is devoted completely. I simply visited entered a seminar in Estonia 10 or more years ago for theoretical philosophy of Frege. And it was devoted to a discussion around this monograph, Theories of Truth. So this is a comprehensive book where it is made distinction between usage of Sinn, Bedeutung, and English translations, which differ in sense and Jan Walensky wrote several articles on reference and meaning, and his point of view coincides with somewhat with Wolfgang Kühne's position. So, and he writes in one of his articles that reference gives us referent, not meaning. So everything moves, develops. So in this field, and it is necessary to be very attentive. And there is no such, truths which are coined or picted on the stone, or on the wall. So everything is developing, but keeping, but along the Frege's view. Developing, but along this view. So when we speak reference, gives us a referent, and the further discussion will be, or the research will be, what is this referent should be or may be, and Bedeutung, and which gives us denotation, is something different. So this difference makes sense in between this discussion. That's the matter.
Yes, thank you for these observations. I really think that in this respect, normally we used to think, we consider that German language is a more ambitious, so to say, in terminology, and English language English is more stricter or more clear, so to say. But exactly at this point, in the point of meaning, so there is a book of meaning of meaning, Ogden. Yeah. So it is very often it is not quite clear what is meant actually. So in this sense, I think that in Frege is perfectly clear when with his Sinn and Bedeutung, and he defines it very quite strictly from my point of view. Yeah, but then in English, when we say meaning, so I think in Church, yeah, he translated Bedeutung as meaning. So it is sometimes Bedeutung is translated as meaning, and then meaning, and then in very often meaning is considered to be some umbrella term. Some umbrella term, and then we have the denotations, references. So and actually here, really,
Yeah.
but I think that if we construct one conception or some particular theory, then we have to choose. We have a variety of technology. We have to choose some. It is preferable to choose some terms and then use them or apply them, so to say, then constantly in the same sense, so to say.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you that this is a matter of convention from the very beginning. What terms, what do they mean?
Then truth turns out to be not a property, actually, but a relation. Actually, property is one-place relation, yeah. But then, if we involve modal considerations, then truth turns out to be a binary relation, and it is actually a relation between a sentence and a particular world. So it is.
Yes,
It is.
yes.
Then everything is relativized with respect to worlds.
Yes.
And then it makes the whole construction more complex, I would say. But actually, so this particular construction which I represented, it is surely about the actual world, so to say, our world. But if we involve other worlds which may be or may be not accessible from ours, then we just make the whole picture more diverse, more complex. But in principle, it remains the same. But
I mean,
relativized.
yes, I mean, metaphysically speaking, should we assume some sort, for example, in model logic, we have logic with a variety domains or with a monodomain, and these are technicalities. But, for example, if we are talking about metaphysical picture in a realistic sense, we should assume, we should commit ourselves to some specific entities, the world, the abstract entities, whatever, and this will make our picture a little bit more complex. In the same way as, for example, ontological pluralist, on which you rely in your work, because you are relying on the Aristotle ways of different speaking of being. Yes, and for example, Chris McDaniel takes this as his motto and develops his ontological pluralism, Turner, and so on. So they develop the ontological pluralism in much the same way as you are developing your truth-bearer pluralism. But you keep a realistic position. Some of them are not so, they hesitate, for example, in this matter. I mean, okay, thank you for the answer. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions, comment? Finally, point of seminar. Thank you so much for such bright presentation and very fruitful discussion about this. It's very good start for our seminar this year, and I suppose that this basic question of philosophy, of logic, of the problem of the truth have to be in the center of our attention, especially when we are talking about real situation in the world. We don't talk about this situation from point of view now, such kind of new truths, new picture of the world, new type of argumentation that are so dangerous for our future. And we have, as a philosopher, come back to our basic question, basic foundation. And today we have a very, very impressive, very wonderful talking about this. Thank you so much, all participants. I know that many of you just now is in the darkness, but it's only physical darkness, but not philosophical. Thank you so much for all participants, and especially Yaroslav. It's a presentation, such kind of presentation that it's necessary to come back again. And I suppose we will have such kind of chance because this meeting was recorded, and very soon you will review this. You will have a chance to review this in our pages of our seminar. And thank you so much for collaboration, Kryvyi State Pedagogical University and Institute of Philosophy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for our invitation.
Thank you, and it's very important that our young students and graduates are here too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.